What's up guys, welcome back to Might As Well. In today's video we are again going to analyze another company. For today I decided to go with AbbVie, due to some requests from you guys. But let's start with the introduction already. AbbVie is a healthcare company based in North Chicago, Illinois, that focuses on pharmaceutical research, development and the production of said products. But they are probably best known for products such as Humira, which is used in the treatment of autoimmune diseases, androgel, which is a sort of testosterone gel, and Depakote, which is used to treat seizures and psychiatric conditions. But let's also take a look at their key values. In the year of 2019, AbbVie managed to earn a total revenue of about 33.2 billion US dollars, which moved their investors to value the company at currently right about 160.7 billion US dollars. However, let's also have a look at how and where the company obtained these revenues. At first, let's split the revenue into geographic regions, since AbbVie, however, only differentiates between the US market and the international market. This stays a little bit broad, but we will still be able to learn a little bit from it. So if we have a look at this graph, we can see that AbbVie's main market is the US market, which delivers about 23.9 billion of its revenue, while the international market lags a little bit behind with its 9.3 billion. However, let's also have a look at their revenue by each sector. The biggest one is the sector of immunology products, which contributes about 19.5 billion US dollars. This is followed by hematologic oncology, which makes up about 5.4 billion, HCV, which contributes another 2.9 billion, and other products which finally add the missing 5.3 billion US dollars. With all of the basic stuff figured out, let's have a look at the distributions to shareholders. AbbVie currently returns capital to its shareholders through dividends and share buybacks. But let's at first focus on their dividend, which sits at about $4.72 at the current point of time and has been growing for the past 7 years, which is also the time at which AbbVie was founded and IPO'd. So we could say that it has paid its dividend pretty much forever. In addition to that, AbbVie's dividend has been growing at a staggering rate of 20.86%, which already indicates a juicy distribution policy at the company. However, let's not ignore the stock repurchase done by AbbVie, which also returned additional capital to shareholders. But let's have an actual look at the numbers. As you can see in this graph, generally speaking, the free cash flow of AbbVie goes up. However, it seems like there are always some minor setbacks after huge gains, like it is in the case of 2016 and 2019. This on its own does not necessarily mean anything bad, but obviously a constant increase would be nice. But let's put the free cash flow into contrast with the paid out dividends, as this shows us how sustainable the dividend actually is. And well, as you can see, there is no danger to be expected from our dividend. If we now, however, add the amount of cash returned to shareholders through stock buybacks, we get a different picture that already looks less sustainable. As you can see, distributions to shareholders exceed the free cash flow of AbbVie in every year except for 2017 and 2019. If you are a usual viewer, you already know what this means. Exactly. The company needs to take on debt in order to keep distributing at this pace, which in the long term isn't really sustainable. Although distributions to shareholders are always important to an investor, the balance sheet should not be ignored. That is why we will take a look at that in just 1 second. This will also help us assess how good the debt to equity ratio is and therefore how sustainable these distributions are. As always, let's start out with the year of 2015, in which the company's total assets sat at about 53 billion US dollars. These were made up by about 16.3 billion US dollars in equity, 29.4 billion in long-term debt, 2 billion in current debt, and 5.4 billion in non-interest paying capital. In order to actually understand these numbers and get real information out of them, as well as help us evaluate how good the balance sheet actually is, we will now calculate the net debt. This is obviously done using the company's debt and its cash position. For the case of AbbVie, we get a net debt position of about 22.8 billion in the year of 2015. But for now, we are gonna put that value to the side and get back to it in a second when we calculate the sustainability ratio. But for now, let's jump to the year of 2019. As you are able to see, AbbVie's total assets increased to about 89.1 billion, which is a pretty hefty increase. These were now made up of about 49.5 billion in equity, 26.7 billion in long-term debt, 3.7 billion in current debt, and no non-interest paying capital. As we already quickly see, the long-term debt of AbbVie increased by a somewhat significant amount. But let's calculate the net debt, as it is the key value we will need later on. By again doing the same process as before, we get a net debt of about 26.6 billion. As I've previously already told you, we now want to actually know how sustainable the debt is and whether it has gotten more sustainable. For this, we will need the company's EBITDA, which is the pre-tax, pre-interest, pre-depreciation, pre-amortization income. In the case of AbbVie in the year of 2019, we have an EBITDA of about 8.3 billion, which would equal a sustainability ratio of about 2.73 or 273%. This means that if AbbVie wanted to do so, it could pay off all its debt it owned in the year of 2015 in around about 3 years. But remember, for that to happen, they would have to cancel their dividends and buybacks. When I'm evaluating a stock, I always want this ratio to stay below 3 or 300% for a financially healthy company that does not have really long-term investments. But that is my personal preference. You can always set that bar higher or lower. I would, however, not recommend you to do so. If we now also do the same thing for the year of 2019, we get a ratio of about 1.77 or 177%. This indicates that although the distributions of AbbVie are fairly high, that has gotten more sustainable. This is, however, somewhat inaccurate and can be attributed to AbbVie's cash position, which has to be this sizable due to the acquisition of Allergen, for which they have to also contribute a hefty cash portion. However, this also means that the cash position will predictably decrease strongly in 2020 and have the debt increase strongly as well. So although on paper the debt has gotten more sustainable, it actually really didn't. But that is something I want to further talk about later on. For now, let's have a look at what the company's financial future could look like. As investors, we are all well aware that the past is a nice indicator, but not everything. That is why I always try to get an estimate of what the financial future of the company could possibly look like. In order to assess this, we usually take a look at the company's revenue and its pre-tax, pre-interest trend. If we now do this for AbbVie, we can see that the trend constantly goes up. There are no hiccups nor any big margins. But let's also do the same thing for the EBIT, which is the pre-tax, pre-interest income of the company. This again resembles a fairly similar trend to the one of the revenue, with one exception, however, which is a drop in the EBIT in the year of 2018. However, in the next year, it easily rockets up again and bolsters double the EBIT of the year before. So if we would average that out, it is still fairly constant. Alright, with the financials covered, let's lay out some other factors about the company which will also influence our margin of safety later on. At first, let's lay out some of the benefits that AbbVie brings to the table. First of all, looking at the company itself, we see a really attractive dividend as well as an awesome growth rate, which can be fairly attractive to those investors trying to push their yields while also getting some exposure to the healthcare sector. However, this in my opinion is not the biggest selling point for a company out there currently. But what I think might indeed be the company's biggest strength is that it is likely that the company will come out of the current crisis mostly untouched. And I, to be honest, can even see some growth coming their way. since the company's main income sources are basically needed no matter what. Obviously, this is only a prediction, but I'm fairly confident, which will lead me to reduce my margin of safety by 5%. However, in general, I'm a little bit more bearish on the stock due to the company on the one hand being somewhat highly leveraged, which we already talked about when we tried to assess how sustainable their debt is. For that reason, I'm going to add 5% to the margin of safety. This is also somewhat directly connected to my next point. As we've already seen, Humira is AbbVie's top seller, and that by a pretty huge margin. However, since the patent for Humira is scheduled to run out in 2023, this could lead the company into somewhat dark times. Yes, the sales won't go to zero instantly, but I'm 100% sure that their sales will get shaved really hard as soon as the patent expires. Obviously, this in itself would not be too much of a problem for a big and diversified healthcare company that can rely on other drugs to bolster the revenue drop. But I don't really see that with AbbVie. Sure, they recently acquired Allergen, the producer of Botox, which is also reason for a lot of debt. However, I think this is more of a desperate move to stay competitive than an actual acquisition to bring the company forward. All of this will lead me to add another 15% to my margin of safety. But keep in mind, sure, I'm painting a fairly grim picture. However, with especially healthcare companies, I prefer to stay conservative. Yes, they could come up with some sort of medication or something could be approved that could be a game changer. But for that to happen, there are a lot of factors going into that. And I pretty much prefer the conservative approach in this case. But let's actually get the fair price for the company and the amount I would be willing to buy AbbVie at. In order to get the fair value of the stock, we have to take a little look at the historic dividend yield. Since the company in this case has not been paying its dividend for a long time, however, we are only able to use the longest possible time of 7 years, in which the company has been able to reach an average yield of 3.42%. This obviously means that you want to buy the stock if the yield is above that average. This would mean that with the current dividend of $4.72, a fair price to pay would be $138. But keep in mind, this is only in respect to the dividend. But let's also calculate the price I would pay for the stock using the before mentioned safety margin, with a historic average of 3.42% and a margin of safety of about 40%, which I got by laying out the benefits and risks of AbbVie. This would mean we want to buy at a dividend yield of 4.78%. With the current dividend sitting at $4.72, this calculation would leave me with a price to buy the company at of $98.74 per share. This was Might as well. Thank you for watching this video.